So here we have Dryad saddle, also known as the pheasant back mushroom. So to ID these mushrooms, you're going to see that the top of the cap has these brown feathery-like scales. They're a shelf-like mushroom, so they're going to sit on the tree like this. And the underside has pores. So a lot of mushrooms you see will have gills, but these ones have pores. You can see all those tiny little holes on the mushroom underside. And the most fun identifying feature about these mushrooms is that the flesh actually smells like watermelon, which is crazy. It's so cool. So if you aren't 100% sure, just tear a little piece off so that you see the white flesh inside, give it a sniff, and it should smell like watermelon. These mushrooms are best harvested when they're still small and young, because that's when they're going to be at their most tender. Once they get too large, they're too tough to eat. So in that case, they're still edible, they're still fine, but they're only good for stock, like soup stock. They won't be good for eating. Whereas these guys, you can fry them up and they're tender and delicious. They're found growing on deciduous trees, and you'll also find them growing in the springtime as well as the fall. You got 2 opportunities to forage these guys. The cool thing about Dryad saddle is it really doesn't have any poisonous lookalikes. So this is a really good mushroom for beginner foragers. This is one of the first types of mushrooms that I ever foraged when I started foraging, because it's super easy to identify, especially by the smell. You cannot eat these raw, you do need to cook them, which is pretty much the norm for all wild mushrooms. You want to make sure that you're cooking them before you consume them. Dryad saddle will typically come back in the same spot every single year. So once you find an area where you see these growing, you really want to mark it down and remember where that spot is so that you can continue to harvest there for years to come. I did leave some of them were getting a little bit too big, and I only ever do take what I need. I don't over harvest. It's good to practice not over harvesting, and that way it gives other people the opportunity to maybe try some, and it also gives the opportunity for the mushroom to spore. And some of the mushrooms on the tree were already a little bit too big, and by that point, unless you're making a soup stock, you're not really going to take those for consumption. So just took a few of the little guys. That's all I need for my dinner tonight. So we're going to hike on out of here. We're going to go back home, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use these today. So I was on my hike out of the woods today, and I am tight for time. Unfortunately, I am getting picked up at a certain spot, so I have to keep moving, so I don't get to sit down and talk about it, but I found a really cool mushroom on my way out. This guy here. So he is a little bit scary looking, I guess. This mushroom is called Gyromitra Korfii. This is actually one of the mushrooms that people commonly confuse for morel mushrooms. But morels have more of like a pitted cap. This one looks kind of like a brain. There's a lot of twists and grooves. Some people refer to it as the false morel. Some people don't like that name because what people say are false morels, people say are toxic and can't be eaten. But this guy, however, can be eaten. It is actually a choice edible. In my opinion, not as tasty as a morel mushroom, but still tasty. This guy is still pretty small. He must have just popped up, which is good because that means he's going to be as less buggy as possible. The issue with these guys is that they tend to get really buggy, and because of all the little twists and grooves and little places to hide, it makes it really hard to clean. So this one probably doesn't have very many bugs in it, which is excellent. That'll be way less work for me later. These guys here, you want to be very, very careful if you are planning to consume one, because they do have a toxic lookalike called Gyromitra esculenta. I'll pop a picture of what Gyromitra esculenta looks like beside it. Yeah, this guy was a little unexpected surprise. So we're just going to add him into the meal that we were going to make today anyway. And I'm going to head back and I'll show you later what we're going to do with everything. We're going to start by soaking our mushrooms for about 15 minutes or so. You don't have to soak your mushrooms if you don't want to. I just do this because it helps evacuate any bugs. It's been about 15 minutes now and I don't see any bugs, which is amazing. That's never happened to me before. So now that these have soaked, I'm going to give them a proper wash and then I'm going to prepare them for cooking. Let's talk about this guy for a second. So when I found it, I was on my way out of the woods and I was on a time crunch, so I wasn't able to actually sit down and talk to you about it properly. But now that I'm back home, I have some time and I can go over it. So it's really important that you're able to identify these guys because they do have a poisonous lookalike. So these guys are called Gyromitra Korfii and their poisonous lookalike is called Gyromitra escalenta. So we're going to go over how to distinguish which one is which. I don't have an escalenta that I can compare the two visually for you, but I am going to post a picture. This one here, Korfii. Korfii is edible. These guys are going to have a tan colored cap. And the color can range a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit lighter tan, sometimes a little bit darker, but it'll generally be a tan color. Whereas escalenta, the poisonous lookalike, will have a dark red or almost like a purpley type color for their cap. The stipe. Unfortunately, my audio got a little bit muffled here, so I'm just going to do a quick voiceover. You can also take a look at the stipe, also known as the stem of the mushroom, to try and differentiate whether or not you have Gyromitra Korfii or Gyromitra escalenta. So the stem of the Korfii mushroom will be a lot thicker and a lot wider than the stem of the escalenta mushroom. Gyromitra Korfii also has a cap that has a lot of folds that usually fold over the stem, so much so that it obscures the stem. So a lot of times when you're looking at a Korfii mushroom on the ground, it almost looks like it doesn't have a stem at all because of how much the cap has overgrown the mushroom, whereas the folds on the cap of the escalenta mushroom usually won't obscure the stem of the mushroom to that extent. So they both grow on the ground. You can't tell that. You're not going to find these growing in a tree, but they are located in different parts of the forest. So the edible species, Korfii, will be found near hardwood trees, whereas the inedible poisonous escalenta is going to be found in sandier soils, usually around pine trees. Now that these are all cleaned up, I'm going to remove the pores from the back of the mushrooms. You do not have to do this if you don't want to. It's completely optional. It is just a textural thing. So some people like the pores, some people don't. I personally do not. So I'm going to remove them. So to do this, I'm just taking a spoon and I'm just gently scraping off the pores from the back of the mushroom. And while you do this, it's going to give off a very strong watermelon aroma, which is amazing. And despite these mushrooms smelling like watermelon when they're raw, they don't taste like watermelon when they're cooked. So you don't have to worry about that when you're cooking. I'm also just removing the stem of the Korfii because it was a little bit tricky to get it clean. It was growing in the ground and I'm having a hard time cleaning it up to my liking. So I'm just going to remove that. And now all that's left to do is to just slice them up. So I'm going to be using these in a stir fry today. So I'm going to be just cutting them into smaller pieces. I'm just going to save these 3 because I think that's all I'm going to need for mushrooms for this stir fry. Stir fry is what we do when we need to use up a bunch of vegetables, so in this case we're using up whatever's about to go bad and we are mixing in the mushrooms. There's also going to be wild leeks in here as well.